us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to do this, Peter. I really am excited to be here, and it's kind of a highlight in all of the things that have been going on recently. So I really miss being in these rooms together, and so having a chance to do this virtually is really cool. And I really wanted to talk about that because of the idea of networking and connecting has so much to do with being in the same room, but we can still connect and still communicate in this time where we're really working through virtual channels and exploring this together. So I'm still a little unsure about what the future holds for us in our part of the field, and I hope that some really creative ideas come out of this virtual time period together, and that help us be more accessible and more thoughtful about our communities. And so that's part of what I want to talk about. So I'm going to present part of a workshop that I do called Make It Rain. And so the workshop's called Make It Rain because it's all about music entrepreneurship. And I've been writing about music entrepreneurship for nigh 10 years now. And I started a blog called The Sybaritic Singer in 2010. And that's how many of you might have connected with me originally. And then it's been one of the reasons why I've connected with some of you, because I've come to your school, I've presented, I've sung, I've performed, all of that good stuff. And we talk about these things all the time, and community is a huge part of that. So I am going to share that now. So can you guys see this screen? Yes, all right. Okay, so like I said, this is part of that workshop, and I want you to feel very comfortable asking questions. That I always tell my students that I've been asking for many, many years, do you have any questions? And anytime I get to that point and I say, do you have any questions? Everybody looks at me and they go, no, I've never had a question in my entire life. I don't know. And so I stopped years ago asking, do you have any questions? And I said, ask me a question. And we said, what kinds of questions can you ask? And so I'd really like you to take that with you through this entire conversation. What kinds of questions can you ask? Because that's how we're going to get to the best information, is if you give me real world thoughts and needs and desires, and we can talk about those things together. So it doesn't like it when okay. So I gotta close that for a second. So I want you to think about how community is a meaningless buzzword if you don't know how to see it, appreciate it, or create it. And we know from all of the experiences, all the most meaningful experiences in our life, if you have ever understood the benefit of being in the room, then you know what community is about, because that's how we connect with other people. Community is why we show up and how we show up and say, I choose these values, I choose this place, I choose you, and I'm gonna walk with you on this journey. I choose you as a person that I wanna spend this time with, that I wanna spend this life with. And if success is about being in the right place at the right time, then community is about making more right places and more right times for more people. And I want us to kind of take that as our thesis statement for this entire conversation. I want to take a moment to say that there's a difference between community and audience. As a marketer, as a communications and marketing person, audience is something that we talk about when we are trying to connect with people who need our goods and services. I want you to think about there being a difference between community and audience. Your community and your network are people that you know, people that you're invested in beyond the work that you do. And so I really want you to take that throughout this entire conversation. Audience is about, cultivating people that are going to hire you for a gig, or who are going to buy your CDs, or buy your merch at your whatever, and community is bigger than that. Community is about being connected to people across needs, across desires, across values. Social proof is a big part of why having a network is important. Let's see here. Nope. Here we go. Social proof is this idea that people want to make easier decisions. They're going to rely on other information besides what they can take in to help make sure that they're making the most efficient decision and the fastest decision for them. So people copy the actions of others in an attempt to undertake behavior in a given situation. This sounds like, you know, kind of confusing language. I just want you to remember that when I talk about music entrepreneurship in these workshops, I talk about 3 pillars that make up our music careers, and that is craft, network, and materials. And if these 3 ideas, if these 3 pillars are all strong, standing tall, then you've got a career. If one of them is not, 2 of them are not, then you need to work on those until they are all like holding their weight, right? If I think about this in the 3 pillars metaphor or the 3-legged stool metaphor, if one of the legs of the stool is weak, then the stool is no longer useful. It doesn't do its job. It cannot be what it's supposed to be if one of the legs is weak. So we think about craft, which is how good are you at the thing that you do, right? If I am a vocalist in this case, then how good am I at the actual performing of vocal music, right? The interpretation of other people's music, the interpretation of my own music, that kind of thing. And then network is the part that we're really focusing on for this conversation, because it's about who you know and who you are connected to in this life. And we want to make sure that you are connecting with people regularly enough so that when they're looking for the thing that you do, your craft, they think of you first, that you are the very first name that shows up in their mind. They're like, I need a mezzo-soprano who knows how to sing new music. And if they're not thinking Megan Enan, then I am not happy about it. So I want you to remember those things for whatever it is that you do. What is the craft that I'm working on here? Do people think of me? Does my network know that that's my craft, that I'm really, really good at that? Okay, let's talk about a couple of different aspects of social proof. Social proof, so you even if you don't know the concept of social proof, you know this in action, right? When you have experts talking about what they know or talking about your work, then they say, this is good. That's that bonus that you get, that people are talking about you and somebody else said you're good, right? If you went to your teacher who is very skilled at what they do, and you said, who else is really good at this? You would take that information really seriously because they're an expert. You know, if you go to Jenna, if I go to Greg Oakes and I say, who else is really good at playing clarinet, right? Greg's going to tell me somebody and I'm going to listen because he's an expert. And so if we have the same idea for celebrities and for users, we're just going to go quickly through these because I don't need you to spend so much time getting into this side of it. I just want you to know that these are a part of it. So a celebrity, this is the idea. If somebody who is already famous in your field or famous in general says that you're good at the thing that you do, people are going to believe them. The user, this is, if somebody has worked with you before, your collaborators, this is where your collaborators come into play. Your network is your collaborators. When they say, oh yeah, I worked with Megan last year on that thing, she did a great job with the theatrical side of this performance, or she did, oh my gosh, it was so great because she never lost the beat on anything, right? She so great to work with somebody who can count rhythms like that. That kind of thing is what we want. If your collaborators are out there talking about you in that kind of way, when other people who are looking for what you do hear that, they're going to keep you in mind for, oh, I know that, oh, I've got this really tricky, rhythmically tricky score and I need a singer for it. I'm going to call Megan because that person told me that she was super easy to work with in rehearsal when it came to rhythmically tricky things. The wisdom of the crowd and the wisdom of your friends. This is when you see a whole bunch of people, this is why we have trending on social media, right? The wisdom of the crowd. Trending just means a lot of people are starting to talk about this, right? And if a lot of people are talking about it, we tend to flock to those things. And the wisdom of your friends, this is a huge one because you're going to trust somebody. You have weighted their opinion. You know when they say, this person was so great to work with because they were so friendly and so on time for rehearsals or whatever it is. When your friend says that, you're gonna go, that's right. that's what, yep, I want to work with that person too, because they said that. And then certification. And this is part of where we spend a lot of weight on this aspect of social proof in music, particularly classical music and new music, which is certification is about like, who gave you the stamp? Who gave you that piece of paper that said that you were good at something? So, and I see a lot of friends and colleagues and clients who get hung up on this one aspect of their social proof, which is, do I have the piece of paper from that fancy institution? Do I have a piece of paper from this fancy summer festival? It's okay. Look at all these other kinds of social proof. You want to have a mixture of them, right? If you don't have the strongest one in one area, you can make up for it in other areas. Okay. This is another big thesis statement of this conversation. The key to being interesting is to be interested. So please take this to heart when you are communicating with other people, when you are trying to grow your network. The most important thing you can do is be interested in them. Show them that you're willing to spend your time and attention on them and what they do, on their craft. And by learning about them, you've invested in them, and they're going to, in turn, invest in you in certain ways. Keep this in mind. You know what? Your mics are off. Say it to yourself right now. The key to being interesting is to be interested. Yep, I can see you. Yeah. Okay. We're going to talk about what I call a networking funnel. We talk about this in a very abstract way, right? And I'm just going to take these kind of big circles of people. We're going to bring it down. So is anybody, you probably can't. Yeah, you can, because I'm screen sharing. You can see my mouse. So is anybody familiar with Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans? I can't see all of you, but let me cycle through here. Yeah. Give me a little nod or shake your head if you, yeah, some of you, and then some of you. Dr. Tyson. So, okay. So I want to quickly explain this concept of Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans. So I'm just going to take the smallest kernel of this. I really, really highly encourage you to read this essay. It's so good. So Kevin Kelly says that all you need to run a successful business is to have 1,000 people who are going to pay. I think it's like if you wanted to run a $100,000 business, if you want to run a six-figure business, right? That all you need is to have 100 people or 1,000 people pay $100 for these services, right? You all do the math. Something similar to this. I'll come up with the better words for it later. So, and the idea being that you don't have to get everybody on your team. Not everybody has to like you. Not everybody has to be your ride or die. You really only need 1,000. You only need 1,000 people to be a leader in your field, to be super visible at what you do, right? So what we're trying to get to when we're thinking about our network is I want us to lead to this idea of creating your 1,000 true fans. We're going to start our networking funnel at what we call strangers or prospects, right? People that we might want to bring closer. I think of this as third tier, second tier, first tier. My first tier, very, very small people that are on my ride or dies. These are people that I'm super connected to, that if they called and they said, I want to work on this project together, I'd be like, I'm on a plane. I'll be there, whatever it is, I'll make it happen. And that's not everybody, but we're trying to get to that. We want to bring people along these. So we really want to think about moving prospects, people that we want in our network, people that we want to be in community with, from strangers into our community. And then maybe some of them make it into that 1,000 true fans. So we're talking about this part right here, which is we want to start bringing people from, they may or may not know you, they maybe don't know anything about you, but we're going to start turning prospects into supporters with active questioning and connection. Remember our screen before, to be interesting, you have to be interested. So it's about making sure that you go out and you connect with them. You're going to start questioning with active questioning. You're going to ask them, what are the things that you need? What are the things that we have in common? What are the things that we can talk about? You know, those kinds of things, and start connecting with them a little bit more regularly. And then as you build those relationships, These people become your acquaintances, your clients, your supporters. These are people, that's the second tier. You know, they're people that you connect with every once in a while. They are people that sometimes buy from your business. They are sometimes people that donate to you. They are sometimes people that hire you. But this level is a very magical level when it comes to your network, because I find that this is an area where you make better and more impactful connections. Because here, oops, sorry, oh, go back, by one. Your 1,000 True fans, you're going to have a lot of overlap with these people, the people that are closest to you in your community. You have a lot of overlap. You know the same people, you talk about the same things sometimes. And here, the reason why this is a magical level is because this has a much more diverse Venn diagram going on. These people work in different areas, they do different things, they care about other interests, and you want to make sure that you're connecting with them because they are going to help you find more opportunities that you're not going to find with right here. So I'm going to keep going with this idea, but I would love for you to think about, what are your questions here? What kinds of questions can you ask about making a networking funnel work for you? We're going to keep going. Just so that you know the kind of format that I'm taking with this talk tonight is that I wanted to present some of these ideas. And so we're going to go through a few more slides of these things, and then we're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to have a bigger conversation because I'd like for you to ask questions about some of these topics that we've talked about. Okay. Here's another thesis statement of mine, is that you don't win any points by being bad at names. I'm sorry. If you're bad at names, let's see another little, like, nod your heads, shake your heads. Are you good at names? Are you good at remembering people's names? Yeah. I love seeing your faces like this. So I want you to think about this, is that, I'm sorry, you don't win any bonus points by being bad at names. And that's one of the things that I had spent a lot of time working on earlier in my professional life. Was I thought, oh, I'm just bad at names. And I gave myself a cop out. And I said, oh, I'm just bad at it. I don't have to do it, right? Oh man, I hope that I don't have to say hi to that person. What happens is that if I'm bad at names and then I start avoiding people because I don't want to look like I'm bad at names, is that I'm not growing my network. Sometimes it takes a little bit of humility to say, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, right? If you've met before, or hey, would you remind me of your name again? It's okay. We meet a lot of people in the world. It's okay to ask people for their name again. Say, oh, I'd really, I was hoping that we'd run into each other again. I'm so sorry I forgot your name. Can you tell me one more time, right? And then play some word association. Come up with all the things that you can to help yourself get better at knowing names. I wanted to tell you this cruise guide story. Be your own cruise guide. How many of you are familiar with the registrar in a college, in an academic institution? Yeah, okay. Would you say that you've had great experiences with registrars in your past? Yeah, Josh Bornfield, I see you. Yeah. So it was not my experience that registrars were the happiest people to interact with, because they have a lot of hard things that they have to say to students. And so in my years in Baltimore, and I worked at Johns Hopkins for a little while, and I met a registrar that I worked with pretty regularly who everybody loved. And I was like, no, that's silly. What's going on here? That can't possibly be real. And I realized, he said, okay, I was like, what's your secret? And he said, oh, I worked on a cruise ship before this. And I was like, you did what? He's like, yeah, I was a cruise guide. And I was like, what do you do as a cruise guide? And he's like, oh, you just connect with guests. You tell them where things are. You tell them, how to get to places. You tell them what time the dinner is going to be. You tell them how to, what shows that they might like and all of that good stuff. And I was like, okay. And I realized that he was one of the most sought after cruise guides by this entire company because he could remember names like that. And he made everybody on this ship, I mean, we're talking thousands of people, right, on these cruise ships. He would remember their names through pure word association, like red hat or something like that. He would remember their names and remember their preferences and find them throughout the day and be like, I thought of you. There is this thing happening tonight that I think you're going to love, right? And he did the exact same thing as a registrar, which was he would run into students on campus. We're talking about Johns Hopkins. It's not a small school. He would run into students on the main campus and he would remember them. And he'd say, oh, you know, there was this class, you're in sociology, right? There's this professor I think you're really gonna like, right? And would build these connections. And people loved this guy. And I want you to think about what kind of cruise guide you can be in your community. Because I want you to remember that it's about real, genuine connection. Building community is about real, genuine connection. Networking gets a bad rap because people don't think of it as real, genuine connections. They think of it as hoarding business cards at an event, right? And that's not what we're about. We're about being this kind of cruise guide that says, I'm going to remember your name because it's bonus points if I spend time and attention on you. And then I'm going to ask you about your life. And I'm going to remember when you're interested in something and I come across that, I'm going to tell you about it because that's a way that I can reinforce our bond. And that is about building community. So we're going to move here. I wanted to take it to a really quick example of a nitty-gritty. How do I take prospects to supporters? How do I build community in an active way? I want you to try informational interviews. This is one way to do it. The art of the coffee meeting, or actually going and having an interview with someone, depending on what the situation is. I want you to think about setting up personal moments, right? So in the time of COVID-19, this can also be Zoom calls. Set up a time. If you came across somebody online and you're like, wow, Jason Moore, you're really good at saxophone. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got into that. Do you have like 20 minutes to have a phone call together? And maybe Jason says yes, maybe Jason says no, I don't know. But the point is that you asked. And this is the idea is, can you arrange a coffee or offer to bring coffee to them? This is where we want to show up, bringing an offering. And you're wanting to ask them about specific skill sets or specific insights they have into something that you're interested about, because you're reinforcing shared values. When you think about that, you're saying, hey, I want you to know who I am because we share a value set, right? I want you to know that I share your values. So if you need something, I'm here. If you need something in this area, I'm somebody you can call on. And I want you to practice your questions beforehand so it doesn't feel awkward. I want you to practice the art of the follow-up question. This is an actual nitty-gritty fact. One of the ways that we get better at conversation is by practicing the follow-up question. This is the way that we start to get it away from feeling like a job interview that's not going very well, is this idea of, I want them to, maybe you start with a question. So Alex Gardner, how did you get into writing for New Music Box, right? And then Alex tells me, and I say, oh, Alex, that's really interesting. What was it that made you want to know more about this resource, right? We want to find those ways to build off of the original topic. So that's going to help you make better connections with people, because you're going, and I think I put this on here, nope, it's in a follow-up later, which is that we want to get past this initial just surface level questions. And that doesn't mean that you have to ask them anything scary. It just means ask them a deeper question. Ask them the next question in the series, right? So if you're asking about one thing, you don't have to switch gears right away. If you're starting to talk about it and you say like, oh, how'd you get into new music? Or how did you get into playing viola, right? And then you say, oh, can you tell me about what was it like, taking singing lessons and viola lessons at the same time? This is a follow-up question. So it takes you to a newer and deeper level together in your conversation. This also helps with names, because the more sticky information you can gather in a conversation, the better you're going to remember that person's name. So this is another little trick of mine for the name recall aspect, which is I don't ask other people their names early in the conversation, because I will forget it right away. So to get better at it, I started having a conversation, talk about something until we get to something that I feel very interested in. And then I say, oh, hey, would you tell me your name? I'm Megan. It's so nice to meet you. It's been really great talking about this. Fill in the blank with whatever it was. Because then when you leave that situation, you can be like, yeah, we had that long conversation about dominoes and what kind of domino games they like to play. God, what was her name? Therefore, if you get into that point of the conversation and then you ask people's names, that's going to help you retain that information a lot longer. Wanted to finish up this part of the slide with the follow-up question, the sticky questions, right? Getting past surface level questions, which is, this is also how you're staying at the top of their mind, because when you get past that, when you're talking about something that both of you really care about, even if it's domino games, I don't know, maybe you're really into it. Maybe you've created an entire like recital performance around playing dominoes. I don't know, but this is going to help you stay at the top of their minds when they're like, oh my gosh, I heard about the most creative recital thing. You play dominoes while she sings at you. It's wild, man. Like whatever it is, I don't care. So that's where we want to get to this place. I have one little tip about here. Can you provide an added benefit? When you're meeting new people, say you are trying to connect with someone who probably has a very busy schedule, that maybe has more experience than you do, is there something that you can bring to the table beyond the coffee that you offered to bring them that might make this an easier yes for them, right? If you are a student, can you say that you're writing a paper about them, right? Are you actually writing a paper about them? Can you find out ways to help them reach their goals by meeting with you? This is one of the reasons that I started the Sybaritic Singer and started writing about these things more, is I wanted to be able to go to performances, and I couldn't afford to go to Washington National Opera whenever I wanted to. You know, that was not my financial situation at that point. And I said, okay, well, how do I get there? How do I do more of this? And so I started a platform so that I could get press tickets, so I could go for free, because I was exchanging something else that I did have, which was time and an ability to write about it, right? And then over time, that helped me connect with other people. So I started a platform so that I could interview people and find out more information about what I wanted. So I can say, hey, Lucy DeGray, can you tell me about how you started Resonant Bodies Festival? I'm gonna write about it for this thing, right? If any of you would like an excuse for that, feel free to write for the Sybaritic Singer. I'm happy to be your right-hand gal for that. So let me know if you need help, if you need an assist in getting in the room to have a conversation with somebody, I'm happy to help. Okay, let's go on. This is where I was talking about real, genuine relationships. So I really want to make sure, oops, I gotta move you guys one more time. Take a moment, think about the kind of roles that are adjacent to what you want to be doing in your ideal professional life. If you're a performer, think about things like conductors, executive directors, artistic administrators, those kinds of things. Think about audio engineers, think about PR agents. This can work for lots of different roles. I just want you to start thinking about who might be in your community as you grow. And I want you to think about starting to cultivate real, genuine relationships with those people right now. So we're thinking about every production you're in, every festival you go to, every grant panel you sit on, every masterclass you sweat through is an opportunity to meet your community members, right? To meet the people that are going to be in your network, that are who are likely to stick around with you for the rest of your career. It blows my mind. I know, it's crazy. So the idea being that we tout as a field going to things like summer festivals for partially this reason, because there's the certification element of social proof. There's the element of who you're around, right? Because oftentimes you've demonstrated craft and ability to get into that festival in the first place. You've demonstrated ability by performing the works that you did or writing the works that you did at that festival. And also you demonstrated it by connecting with those people. And those relationships carry on through years afterwards. You can think about this in lots of different ways. And that extends to schools, that extends to all sorts of situations. And I want you to think about, that's one of the reasons why we talk about being in those arenas. When you talk about going to a summer festival or you talk about a training experience of some sort, is because you are creating a very sticky, memorable situation for yourself in which you all worked towards common purpose. You all had shared values. You all spent time learning about each other over the course of weeks, right? That is a very concentrated feeling. Same thing happens at certain residencies, all sorts of productions. If you're there for a little while, you've really come together and you're working towards common purpose and you're expressing shared values. There is a lot about that that is going to be a very strong community aspect. And I want you to think about that. Can you create those experiences outside of those? If we can't go to summer festivals this year, if you can't go to summer festivals in general, how can you create that kind of experience outside of that parameter? How can you work together with people in your community towards a common goal, have deeper than surface level conversations, right? Shared values, and then demonstrate the value of that outside of what you've done so that people can say, wow, you guys really did that. That's cool. So I want, like I said kind of earlier, when I talk about real, genuine relationships, this really does not mean like ask them like, what's your deepest fear? Or can I like touch your stomach? I don't know. Don't do it. Don't do it. I want you to be like comfortable. I want you to be like, cool. When you talk about going beyond, like I said, going beyond a surface level conversation is getting into, yeah, the reason I brought up dominoes earlier is because my mom really likes to play dominoes. I don't know. What does your mom really like to do? Like, I want you to think about that. That goes beyond, but that's not something that's scary for me to share. There's differences in information sharing. And I want you to think about that when you're asking follow-up questions, is that you can ask something that gets beyond surface level without asking somebody to disclose things that aren't comfortable. So we're going on to this. Building real community takes trust, commitment, and patience. There will be years that you do not create anything together, but you're still in communication and you're still building your relationship. I want you to think about that. Your community doesn't have to build anything with you, doesn't have to perform with you, doesn't have to even really like be in the same room that often with you to know that it's your community, right? Because you're cheering on their successes, they're cheering on yours. You're comforting them in their woes and they're comforting yours. And it requires mutual interest from participating parties. I want us to think about that, that building community about mutual interest from participating parties. So if you're not participating, you're not part of the community. If you don't have mutual interest, you're not part of the community. Okay. So one quick tip here that I like to share with some of my clients is that I want you to think about it takes 10 positive contact points before an ask. When I talk to composers who are trying to connect with more performers, this is a point that often comes up, is that they know that they're supposed to connect with performers so that they can get their music out there. And so they send out thousands of cold emails and say, perform my music, please, right now, like right now, right now. And you say, okay, no. So I see Jessica Meyer. So I want you to remember that it takes trust, commitment, and patience. And here's just a good baseline for you. And I want you to think about 10 positive contact points before you make an ask, before you ask somebody to give to your development campaign, before you ask them to give to your Kickstarter, before you ask them to hire you as a soloist. I really want you to think about, by and large, it's going to take about 10 positive contact points, which means they need to just get to know you a little bit more. And so maybe that's through an email, maybe that's through a coffee meeting when you can, maybe that's through a Zoom coffee meeting, who knows? So part of that is that 10 positive contact points is not liking their posts on Facebook. That doesn't count. Sorry. Neither does hearting their their tweets and hearting their Instagram posts. That doesn't count. I'm sorry. And I need you to think about they engaged with you. So I want you to think about 10 positive contact points means engaging together. We can talk about this more maybe when you have questions, but I just want to put this in your brains because of that. That's such a common thing that I hear, particularly composers being told, oh, you have to go send out 1 million cold emails. And the same thing for performers. You have to just go pitch yourself all over the place. Part of that is true. You have to put yourself out there on the regular, but I do want you to think about building that relationship so that it makes it a much easier ask when you get there, so that you know what their needs are, so that you can position yourself as the person who is there to meet their needs. And if you are not the thing that they need right now, they're going to value that too when you say, oh, sorry, that's not me, but you know who is this other person that I've already been building relationships with who is very good at the thing that you're looking for. Let me connect you. So think about how you can be both of those things. Okay. Another little nuts and bolts thing is talking about email lists. We can get more into this if you'd like to. Just as a quick conversation is that sometimes I run into friends who don't remember that they don't own their social media. So if you have thousands of followers on any particular platform, they don't belong to you. They don't. So if that platform goes under tomorrow, then you don't get that information anymore unless you've saved it somewhere else and then you've done the work, right? So however, with an email list, that does continue. Those contacts do belong to you because you can export them at any point in time. And you could keep them, you can take them to a different platform, you can take them to a different email client, all of that stuff. When you're thinking about contact lists, if you are before a CRM or a contact relationship manager, any of those things, development manager things, for those of you who already work kind of like farther down in your careers in nonprofit land or in music entrepreneurship as a freelancer, perhaps you already have those things. Most of you, I don't imagine that that's something that you're working with on a regular basis. So I would imagine that some of you have an email list and some of you don't. Just be aware that if you prize having a way to communicate with people that happens digitally, that you don't keep that solely in the hands of somebody else whose platform can disappear at any moment. So if you want to sign up for an email list or to create an email list, you know, MailChimp is great. You can use it for free for up to like 2,000 subscribers or something like that. And then we just want to make sure that people know how to get to that list so that you can start to build that relationship. If you have an email list, you send out information every so often, then that's one of our contact points is that, oh yeah, Megan does do that thing. Oh, that's right. You know what? If I wanted to coach or consult with Megan, she does that. And she just told me how to get a hold of her, right? That's just keeping it easy peasy, no hard sells, just telling people that's a thing you do. Okay. I think this makes sense so far. If you can't read this or you want to see these later, just let me know. And I want you to remember two key points for this, which is your goal is to enhance their life. So it's all about exchange of value. Make sure that you are putting something valuable out into the world. If you're sending an email, but it's just news about you that they may or may not get any value of, think about how you could change that around. Make it about them. What can they get out of knowing about that? Can they know about another ensemble? Can they go to something? Can they be entertained by it? Can they watch your video and enjoy it for a few minutes? Can they know about a call for scores that's out there in the world and then make that connection? Can they know that they could go to Next Fest whenever they want to? All of that good stuff. And then always include a call to action. Why are you sending it to them? What do you want them to do, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit later if you want to. Last part, it's a big one. It doesn't count unless you press send. Community building doesn't work unless you press send, okay? Community building doesn't happen if you think about connecting with people, but you don't do it. So I don't care where you are in the scale of introvert and extrovert. I want you to just remember that it's in the act of doing that is community building. That's why we talk about building, right? We have to build this community together. We have to build those bonds for our network. And so if you're just thinking about it and you say, oh yeah, I really want to connect with that person, or wouldn't it be nice if we talked sometime, but you never press send, you never send that text, you never send that email, you never call them. You're just thinking about building community, you're not doing it. So next one. Okay, some quick and dirty action steps, and then we'll talk about questions and stuff like that. So when we talk about building community, I want you to think about your network in being local, regional, national, international, kind of like ripples on a pond. It's a little bit easier to connect with your local or people, and this extends to our digital realm as well. If you kind of think about people that you interact with on a regular basis, kind of think of that as your local, people that you interact with on a semi-regular basis, kind of think of that as regional, national, people that you don't interact with as much, right? I want you to kind of pull these people into your mind. Think about some of the people that you would like to be in community with a little bit more actively. I want you to think about how to research the appropriate way to contact that person, right? If they put their email address out there somewhere, or they have a more open social media account, like an Instagram account or like a Twitter account where you can just follow them, you know, not like friends on Facebook, etc. Okay, a quick caveat right here I just want to talk about message of interest. I just want you to think about, you are trying to show them that you're interested in connecting with them. And so a message of interest can just be, hey, I realize that you like to write about Ludislavski. I'd really love to connect with you about that because I've been thinking about that recently. Would you mind talking to me about that sometime, right? These are not overly complicated messages. This is something, you know, that you would send in a Facebook message or, you know, an Instagram message that just says, hey, I noticed that you're into this. Have you been baking bread recently? I'd love to learn how to bake better bread, right? Can you tell me, what are you using? You're just talking about that first step in showing shared values and shared interests. Part of this is making sure that you know who you are in this situation. I want you to think about making a list of your skills or the things that you want people to know about what you do. So think about your craft and what makes you unique. What do you want people to know about you? What are the things that you do that you want people to know about you? I had a conversation recently with a friend who was trying to tell me, you know, that they wanted to get hired to play, you know, this kind of gig, but they're known in the field for performing. So we're talking about, let's say, percussion, for example. So they're known for performing on drum set, but they really want to, but their passion is all of the mallet, like keyboard instruments, right? But I was like, okay, well, are you telling people that that's what you want to do? And they're like, no. And I was like, okay, well, let's start there, right? So this is just, we're talking very basic level here. I want you to know what it is that you want people to know about what you do. I shared an example with this friend that a while back, I was getting a lot of calls from people to do administrative work, artistic administrative work for their ensembles, and not to sing with them. And I was like, I don't like this very much because I wanted them to know that I wanted to sing, that I thought of myself as a soloist, that I thought of myself as a freelance performer and collaborator that worked with other people. And yes, I do have communications and marketing skills. I do have development skills that I'd like to share. However, when we're talking to each other, I want you to think of me as a performer first. And so I had to change some of the way that I was talking about myself online, that I was talking about myself on my website, in my resume and things like that, so that I led with the thing that I wanted people to hire me for, or the thing that I wanted them to connect with me about. So think about those things for yourself. Then brainstorm, you know, what are the different types of like messages of interest or calls to action that I want them to do? Do I want them to get on the phone with me? Do I want them to think of me the next time that they hear about a, you know, a vocal gig or something like that? That's a couple of examples for that. I want you to send your messages and create a reminder for yourself to follow up, because everybody's busy and maybe you just need a second chance, right? They saw your email, it got buried in their inbox. It's okay to send them another one. Just don't hound people. You know, you'll know, you're going to start developing a rhythm to knowing how many times is too many times to contact people. And also you're going to have a threshold for yourself about, this is about how long I'm going to wait before I follow up again. You know, sometimes it's like 10 days, right? If you are starting to think about following up in like less than 24 hours, you know, just like put a hold on that. Just like give yourself a little bit more time. so don't be that person. And so I want you to, and then make a plan to follow up on messages of interest that come your way, right? So if people are sending messages of interest to you, follow up on those and connect with them. Even if that doesn't necessarily lead to the next big project in your life, it can be a very low risk way to know that you have a friend who is working and doing stuff in Nashville, that you have a friend who's working and doing stuff in Cheyenne, Wyoming. That's okay. That's enough. That's community. So And then, you know, finally, world domination, because that's what we're all about. So, all right. We have a couple of, I wanted to kind of have you thinking about what are your favorite professional development opportunities? What are your favorite community building activities? Where are places that you go? Or how do you interact in the world that helps you build those bonds of community? And then we're gonna talk. So I'm gonna stop sharing this. We're gonna go back to our screen. And let's see here. I think if you guys see the chat function, I am happy for you to type your questions into the chat, and or if you want to just send them directly to Peter and he can ask them, they can be slightly more anonymous. I think if that's, if, whatever suits you best, and we'll go from there. So. Oh, Nick. Yes, so Nick Norton. So Nick says that he's got an idea or two about how to execute on building your network that's worked for him. So Nick, let's see here. Can you unmute yourself?
I certainly can. How are you?
Yes. Hey.
Mm-hmm. How you doing? This has been an awesome talk. I'm sorry I tuned in a little late. Megan, you're doing
I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're feeling a little bit better. So,
oh, thank you. It's been a very wild week. It's been a very wild month. But I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels that way.
Yeah. So tell me a couple, because you've done a lot of kind of building of your community in LA with Equal Sound, as well as running professional sound, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So tell me what you like.
Well, so the thing that always struck me about the new classical world, or the classical world, or the experimental world, or academic music, or whatever catch-all term that doesn't quite work that we're going to use, is that the focus was always more on resume building than it was on making music. And by that, I mean, I grew up around the film industry, and I grew up playing in punk bands. And then in college, I decided to become a composer after I just took a composition class for fun. And I was like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I think that gave me a background or an outlook that is perhaps unique in the classical world. And I have no wish to brag, but I can pay my rent as a composer. And I have very, very few commissions from classical ensembles. In fact, one of my favorite composers who I look up to, who was one of my professors, told me that he's actually never been paid to write a piece. And I have all kinds of crazy leftist economic ideas about why the classical world is unhealthy, but we can skip those for now.
Next chat.
The thing that you learn in entertainment, and I believe if we differentiate between arts and entertainment, we're just kind of being classist, and it has no substantive meaning in postmodernism or after postmodernism, which I think actually ended last week. But anyway, and that's an interesting question for everyone to think about, is that the only thing that matters is who you're friends with, period. And this is Nico Muhly advice. He says, write music for your friends. And this is Chris Roundtree advice. He's like, stop trying to get Wild Up to play your stuff. Go do your own thing. And it's cool, Wild Up will come to you. So you gotta, excuse my language, you gotta have some balls about your own art form if you want anyone to listen to you. And what I used to say when I was teaching composition at the university level to my students, that is a challenge and is unhealthy, but is also unfortunately true, is that if it's 8 o'clock on a Saturday night and you're not at a show, you're not cut for a career in music. Maybe it's a passion or a hobby, and that's beautiful, and I wish people all the best, and we should have it as a passion and hobby that we care about. But if you want to make a living at it, you got to go out and do it.
There's a really great book that I wanted to add to this. My friend Kevin Clark, who is a composer, who also now lives and works in the Pacific Northwest, when I was coming up like through Peabody, and he had a very good like phrase where he was like, show up and move the chairs. That's it. So if you're at a place where people aren't coming to you and asking you to actively be involved in their community, show up and help them move the chairs for a little bit and see how fast you become part of their community. Like, and it doesn't have to be all the time. You don't have to spend, like, you honestly don't have to, you don't have to only do that. You don't have to only move the chairs, but you do have to show up and move the chairs sometimes. Like, you have to show that you're willing to move it. Yeah.
I will just say that my first paying job in music was at the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra as like an admin assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hounding them for months.
Mm-hmm.
They were giving me the runaround. And then I finally said, hey, do you have any need for volunteers? And I came and tore tickets at a concert and they hired me the next day.
See, and one of the things that I want us to remember, two sides of this, which is showing up and showing them that you're invested in their work means that there's often a reciprocity to them showing you that they're interested in your work. And this idea of it's okay to ask for help, because so it's always okay to ask questions. There's a concept, and I think I messed this up. I messed up the attribution of this recently, so I'm nervous to do it again. But the concept is, if you actually show up and ask people questions, it makes them more invested in your work, right? And I find this, this happens all the time, is that, I connect with people at a residency, or I connect with students when I'm out and performing, and they ask great questions in master classes. And it's those students that I'm like following them on Instagram and I'm cheering them on when they're like, they have their recitals, and I'm like, yeah, get it. Like, that's, so just remember that both of those things work in your favor. So, okay, I'm gonna talk about a couple of these questions. So Natalie has said, how do you balance performance life with administrative life? I feel like 10% of my work is actually performance-based, and administrative obligations take up way more time than I'd like. Yes, so this conversation is not limited to music at all. This is a big, just business question in general, which is, are you spending most of your time working in your business or on your business, right? And so this idea is, there's always a give and take. Sometimes I want you to remember that we work in cycles, and sometimes you're in the building your business stage, you're in the part where you need to do a lot of administrative work. Remember, and I think, thank you to Mark for like the layup there with the third pillar, when we talk about craft, network, and materials. Sometimes you realize that one of those isn't fully doing its work when you have to do a lot of work on your website, when you have to do a lot of work to build grant application materials, when you have to do work to build multiple performance projects, those kinds of things. Those are seasons where you're going to have to do a lot of administrative work, so that you can have seasons where you're doing the performing it all the time, right? Think about it in that way first. Also think about, am I making this too hard? So sometimes we spend a lot of time doing a lot of administrative work because we're kind of keeping ourselves from doing something else that we should be doing. And so remember that procrastination can also show up in those ways, and it's a little bit sneakier that way. That I think you want to be aware of how you make income in your life. And sometimes your administrative work is the bulk of your income. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes your performance is the bulk of your income, and you get to spend more time doing that. I think that a lot of people, if you're in academia, if you do that, you went into academia and you're like, I'm in music, I'm doing this, right? But how much of your time is spent in faculty meetings? How much of it is in advising? Like, there's, no matter what job or field or niche you're in, there are always those kinds of things. And it's about making sure that you're building boundaries. It's about making sure that you understand where your income is getting generated and how much time you need to spend on those things to generate the income that you need in your life. And also realize that you might be in a season where you have to get the beginning stages of things off the ground. So if you're in school, you're doing like 4 to 8 years, like however many years of things, you're working on your craft a lot. You're like really, really focusing on it. So you might be in the part where you get to write all the time because that's how you're working on your craft. But then you get out of school, perhaps you're trying to build the business side of your compositional career, and you can't write as much because you have to make a website, whatever it is. You have to go do things. You have to get connected to stuff. And there are seasons that you have to work through. And the idea is to know what you're trying to work towards so that you can kind of turn the dial a little bit. why am I spending, if you have a good sense of how much time you're spending on something, why am I spending 70% of my working hours on writing grant applications and 30% on practicing? Maybe I can change that, right? So start having a better understanding of how much time you're spending on stuff. Now, if that didn't fully answer your question, I'm happy to talk about it after this or another time. And
so we're at an hour, but there's lots of great questions, so we can go as long as you'd like. And
cool.
I just wanted everybody to know that there are a lot of great questions.
Yeah,
so
well, I'm going to keep answering some questions, and then I will not be offended if you have to leave, if you just wave, and we'll check each other out another time and connect and do all that fun stuff. So please don't feel like you are beholden to being here past this kind of designated time, but I'm going to answer some of these questions so we can keep chatting. Okay, Alan Tyson, what are one of the best and one of the worst examples of networking you've ever witnessed that didn't involve you? Oh, like naming names or something. Let's see here. I'm gonna just kind of blanket statement this, that one of the worst ones is the being too thirsty too soon. So is always like when you show up to something and you lead with how you're going to do something for somebody and they haven't told you that they wanted it, right? So they didn't tell you that they were interested in you writing for them. They didn't tell you that they were interested in working together. And you said, oh, well, I'm going to write this entire, opera for you, for example. And you're like, no, I don't want that, right? So those are, because you're bringing too much to that, and you're putting a burden on that bond, because what you're asking is, you leveled something up and you said, can you join me on this, right? I'm going to write this for you. And even if that person is like, well, I'd like that in the future, but I don't want it now, you've asked them to join you in something that is now a burden to them, even if they haven't said yes. So making sure that you're kind of bringing something as you figure out what the needs are, so that you know that you're always meeting each other at where you are. That takes some more conversation. So, and best. Oh, I am going to name names here because Michael Hall is one of my favorite examples for like best networking, because he's genuinely interested in meeting people and does it in a way, he's friendly and can start a conversation about anything. And so he's just such a good example of that, because we'll be in a coffee shop together and, people will show you with their body language if they're open to talking to you. And if somebody turns to him and says, oh, excuse me, or whatever, and then he'll say, oh, love that backpack you're carrying. Did you know? Like, and then also leave that conversation when the person is like, I gotta go, right? So being clear on physical cues that say, I'm open to talking, and also I'd like to be done talking now, are good examples of these kind of networking skills, as well as just the openness to be the person who says, I like this thing that's happening right now. I like your shirt, and also, have a nice day, right? So being present and open. Mark, how do you decide, measure whether paid and network opportunities are worth their time? Oh, great question. So I think that everybody has a different capacity when it comes to being able to pay for things. And so I think I always want you to figure out whether or not, if it's something that you don't have to worry about, if you're not worried, we're not talking about that. We're talking about if you're the person that needs to budget to figure out what you want to go to in that year. That's when you start asking around and you say, like, find out who in your network has gone to something, and people that are maybe in what I think of as kind of like a couple steps ahead of me in their career, that have been doing it for a little bit longer, have had kinds of success that I would like to have in my career. I'm going to ask them, not so far ahead that they aren't haven't done it recently, haven't gone to a conference like that recently, or haven't connected with people like that recently. And I'm going to say, what kinds of conferences did you find impactful? I try to think about networking situations where I have the best opportunity to meet people, and those tend to be not so huge, right? Because remember what we said about shared, like connecting deeper than surface level, and also shared values. If I show up in a room with 20 people that are all there to talk about the same thing, I have a much better likelihood of making better connections at that than I do of going to Midwest where there's thousands of people, but I'm not really going to talk to them because, and there's not necessarily a time, like maybe I run into somebody on the exhibition room floor, but if I don't already have an in, it's not set up in a way where I'm supposed to connect with them. So if you're going to anything, if you're going to spend money on anything, judge whether or not you're going to have time to connect, like past the surface level, and shared values, like making sure that you actually have shared values in that situation. Does that, let's see here, Mark, where are you? Does that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to like add just a little bit to the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of paying, I mean, I think there's paying in terms of the financial commitment, but there's also a question of paying in terms of like a time and in investment in that sense. You know, for example, if it's a conference that expects you know, several proposals and recommendation letters versus something that's like, no, we just want an application fee.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, because you're also thinking about, you know, what are all of the ancillary costs, like time cost and kind of psychological cost of getting ready for something like that. And I prioritize based on who I have the potential of meeting there and what do I have coming up in my life that they might be interested in or we might be able to connect on, right? So I'm going to use my Midwest example again, is that I went to Midwest 2 years ago because I had 2 wind ensemble commissions that are being written for me by women composers. And I was like, guess where I need to show up, right? Is to connect with where are there going to be a whole bunch of wind ensemble directors that might bring me in to go to their school, go to those things, sit down, talk to people, do that kind of stuff. And if you're thinking about, okay, for example, the other side is in my ensembles, we've talked about submitting for like APAP or the regional performing arts like conferences. But sometimes you have to buy a booth and the booth is like $400 something and the application for it is like, you know, hours long to do. And it asks you for like 10 videos. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Like,
yeah, exactly.
And then I have to weigh based on, do I feel like it's the project that I'm trying to take to that? Do I feel like it has the wow factor that is going to get booked so that I'm going to recoup the costs that I'm putting into this? So I'm going to think about, and they weren't the projects at that time. We didn't have enough of those materials to go do that performance and then connect with enough presenters to recoup the costs of that conference. And I was like, you know what? I can build some relationships with presenters and get us into some get us into some performance opportunities outside of going to a meat market kind of situation. So that so I'm doing it a little bit differently. I'm going to work on really building in local and regional performances so that I can get some of that documentation so I can take it to bigger situations. And I'm not only building materials just for that one conference application.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Great question.
Thanks.
Chloe, I have a question about how to professionally deal with rejection in general when it comes to networking. Broad question. Love it. So dealing with rejection. So just remember that when, let's take it for an example, like somebody drops off your email list. This is a very like low threshold, like somebody unsubscribes like from you in general, right? And you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't hurt. That's fine. That's cool. No, just know that it's okay if it does hurt. Like, but that your plans are to connect with people who want to be in the dream with you. And if they're going to self-select out of that, that's okay. They're not your audience. Like, they're not your community. They might be part of your larger community, but they don't have to know about every single thing. Maybe they're like trying to digital detox. Like, you have no reason to know why they're not necessarily connecting with you right now. And the idea is, okay, that's just like, forgive them and release them and say like, okay, maybe they'll come back around in the future. Maybe they won't. It's okay, because they're going to go do and connect with all of the people that they need to. And my responsibility isn't to the person who's self-selecting out of this, it's to the person who's self-selecting into this. So anytime somebody says like, not for me right now, you can be like, cool, you know, wish them best, and say like, I got to keep working on the things that the people that are showing up really, really want, right? I'm going to keep like connecting over that. Is that, I know that that's kind of the broad answer.
No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So just, and I know it's, rejection sucks, right? But it's the same, particularly singers, like I know you're in here, like when we do the audition panel thing, and you're up in front of those people like all the time, and it's just like an entire audition season of rejection sometimes. It happens. And like, the idea is that you have no idea, you have literally no idea why they didn't pick you. And whatever reason you're thinking of, I bet you it's not that. Like, I promise you. And so you have no idea, and really it's none of your business. Like, but what they did is said, okay, so this wasn't the opportunity. So just keep knocking, keep going. Like, go find the people that are self-selecting into it. And that's great. Yeah. Okay. When moving to a new city, what are the first steps toward building a local network as a performing musician? Hannah, what a fantastic question. This is very timely for me because I just moved to New Orleans from Iowa in the fall, and I was really excited about right now kind of going out and doing things a little bit more regularly. Building a local network, I find two ways of doing this. Nope, let me talk about three. Okay, so 3 ways of doing this is if you have any prior connections, any warm contacts in the city that would go with you to something and would help you meet somebody that plays, try and choose things, like I said about with the conferences, see if you can choose something where it's a little bit smaller so you have a much higher likelihood of being able to connect with people. It's okay if you sit down at something to just say like, you know, hey, do you like, is this your first time coming to see these people play or whatever? Just ask a question. Go with somebody, like, know ahead of time that you're going to be like, you know, cultural wingmen for each other, wing gals, wing persons, and for each other. And then your goal is just to like say hello to the performers afterwards, or say hello to the presenter or something like that. Just remember, first of your 10 positive contact points, just getting them to say hi to you, right? So that's our first one, is like cultural wingmen. Go to things, show up, move the chairs, right? The second of those, get involved, you know, audition for things, you know, connect with people at every city of certain sizes has like an arts guild or something like that, or they have, you know, a school that brings in people to talk, or they do, you know, there's like workshops for artists and stuff like that. Go to those, right? Anything like that, just go. If there's like an arts commission for your city, like go to one of the meetings and meet those people. Yeah, I know. Sorry. And then the third one is sign up for every email list. When you move to a place, sign up for every single email list that you can find that has anything to do with your interests, because they are like, you know, every nonprofit is running an event at some point in time, right? Sometimes they're going to be like, you know, $100 gala type things. Sometimes they're going to be like pay what you can, like coffee breakfast things, right? So you can find something through those situations that will help you get into the room with people or connect virtually and talk, right? So right now we're doing one of those examples right now. You've seen these people right here. So this is an example of doing it virtually, but we can do the same thing, right? Sign up for all of those email lists. And then once you feel like you know what's going on in your city, then go ahead, you can unsubscribe, and then they can worry about how you're rejecting them, right? So call back. So sorry. So I also want to remind you that when I'm talking about community, I'm not only talking about people who do the same thing as you professionally, that your community extends beyond music, that your community extends beyond the arts. And I want you to think about all of the rich and varied interests that you have in your life. Sign up for those email lists too, right? Go to places where people collect around shared interests. If anything sparks your interest, like sign up to volunteer for a park cleanup day, and then meet people that you're working with on raking leaves or whatever it is that you want to do during that time, and say like, hey, I'm also really into, you know, experimental film. Do you know anything about that in this city? And they might be like, no, but that sounds really interesting, and I'm going to remember you when I do hear about something like that. I'm going to keep going, but feel free to ask questions about that. So, Christoph, I run a nonprofit intermedia opera company, and I was told different definition for audience. Audience are the donors that support the organization so that the organization can create work for the ticket buyers. What are your thoughts? Great. Great, great, great. Yes, okay, so I want to talk about this from a marketing side. And I have a post on this on the Sybaritic Singers, so please go check it out if you're interested in the more fleshed out version of this, where I talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary audiences. So kind of 1, 2, and 3. And so in this case, this definition for your audience are the donors that are going to support the organization. That's your primary audience, because they're basically the people that are giving you the funds to make it happen, right? When I think about primary audience as a performer, it's who's the audience that's hiring me the most, right? So for me, the donors for the opera company are maybe a tertiary audience, because I'm not one-on-one interacting with them. And so, but all of these people are part of my community, right? So, but the audience itself, our primary audience is who's hiring you. Secondary audience is usually like who's helping those people who are hiring you, right? Third is like more generalized, maybe listeners, right? And your audience changes based on what your programs and services or your products are. So we can definitely have a much deeper conversation around that. I just want you to remember that when I talk about this from a marketing perspective, I'm talking about primary, secondary, tertiary audiences. And so in this case, if running that opera company, if by and large your donors are your primary audience, then you're creating a lot of your marketing that's targeted towards them. You're creating a lot of your work that's targeted towards them. However, if your donors are not your primary audience, and say maybe your ticket buyers are your primary audience, and you're trying to gain more ticket buyers, then you're going to change your marketing. You're going to change a lot of that stuff so that you're meeting the needs of your primary audience. Okay. Oh yeah, Ben, I love that. Doesn't work unless you press send. That's true. Christoph, is the title of the book? I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure maybe you can unmute.
You had mentioned it before you finished your presentation towards the end of it, and I didn't catch it or whatever.
I don't know. Which part was I talking about that?
I think it, yeah. Well, it's also in here. I think Nick made a mention of either the book or a phrase from it. Now I can't remember.
It might have been, I might have been referencing, I don't know if I remember the title of the book that I was maybe talking about this with the Kevin Clark thing, which is like, show up and move the chairs.
Yes, that's the move the chairs thing.
There's a book that is related to that conversation that is, okay. Let me find this for you, right. But I think it might be called The Chairs Are Where the Audience Sits, or like and it's kind of about, it has a lot to do with like audience experience and stuff like that. But let me find that for you and we'll connect about that.
Great. I'd also love to chat with you more about the previous question.
Sure.
A large topic.
Yeah, we'll do that. Let's, Tyler, what were some of your first stepping stones when you were first starting forming your career or platform? Did it start with a referral from a professor, friend, or family member? Oh, I'm going to tell you, this is one of my favorite stories. So when I was finishing at Peabody, when I was finishing my master's at Peabody, I was in David Smook's song analysis class, and I will be forever grateful to David Smook for being a fantastic mentor in my life. And I remember during that class, I was working on my master's recital, featured a big George Crumb cycle, and he had studied with George Crumb, and so we had connected on that topic. And I went to a performance by myself in DC and happened to see him sitting there with a couple of other people. And so he was sitting with Armando Bajolo, and he was sitting with a couple of other people that like worked at Catholic and did other compositional things in the area. And because I went to a show by myself and I just wanted to show up, it was Theo Bleckman, I had to go. So I went, and David Smook said, "Oh, Megan, I just want to introduce you to these people." And that was how I met Armando, and I worked with Great Noise Ensemble for quite a few years in DC, based on just connecting at that one thing. We met at a concert. He knew that I wanted to sing more new music, that I was into singing things like Crumb. And he's like, "That's great. You know what? I think we should work together sometime." And I was like, "Cool, let's do that." And I think the very first gig that I had with Great Noise Ensemble was singing in a vocal ensemble for somebody else that was a soloist. I volunteered for it. So just remember that we all choose these things as we go to. I didn't start saying like, well, I can only work with you if I'm the soloist for this thing right away or whatever. You know, I think the next gig that I did with them, I found all of the vocalists for it because I showed up and moved the chairs, like to make sure that I showed them that I was interested and I valued what they were doing and I wanted to participate. So, and that started, and you know, I sang with them last year. So I've sung with Great Noise Ensemble over about 10 years at this point. So that's just one. Yeah. Yeah.
So Megan, you've been so generous with your time. I think looking at the volume of questions that's coming in still, I think it's super clear that we need to have you back and finish this up. So let's do this again.
Y'all, I am going to keep these questions because these are all so great. And then I can I'll let you know, and I might write about some of them, and we'll connect and we can talk about them, you know, in our own little Zoom calls and chats and things like that. So please feel free to find me. My website is meganenan.com. I think a bunch of you know me on social media as @mezzoenan, IHNEN, just in case you don't see it somewhere else here. Yeah, I would really love to make sure that I connect with most of you. And if we haven't met each other in person, I would really love to make sure that we at least, you know, connect on another kind of Zoom call. So Peter, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This has been so great. I really, really appreciate it. And for everybody who's on this call, I've just posted a link to Megan's website, and also just a little bit of information about the Next Festival and Next Fest Connects, which is, we're bringing people like Megan to you for free as a service. And if you're in a position to make a donation, please do so. That I sent a link about that. And I'll be sending out a follow-up email with links to Megan's website and some other links. And please stay in touch, like us on social media. There's lots more that's coming your way. Really, really great world-class artists. Next Tuesday, we have a masterclass with Ashley Bathgate, fantastic cellist. Next Thursday, we have a seminar on choreographers and composers working together. And we have also coming up masterclasses with Miranda Cookson, Ralph Ferris, Jeff Ziegler, all kinds of talks that are coming up. So please like us and join us, and stay creative, stay safe, and come back. We hope to see you soon. Thanks again, Megan.
Thanks, everybody. See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.